and welcome to the Sustainable Places event series at the Bartlett Faculty of the Built Environment here at UCL. I'm Niamh Murtagh, Principal Research Fellow at the Bartlett School of Sustainable Construction, and I'll be chairing the event at this lunchtime. Sustainable Places is a new monthly online event series led by the Bartlett, where we're inviting leading thinkers in the built environment field to explore all aspects of the climate crisis and how it intersects with the built environment, from sustainability and green design to climate adapted cities and housing. Today, you've joined the April event, which is titled Housing for Resilient Aging Communities. A few words about the session. So the event today we will use to explore how housing for aging communities can become more resilient to changes like the climate crisis. We have three aims for the webinar. We want to, first of all, introduce almshouses to those who may not have come across this form of housing before. We'd like to discuss some initial findings from our research project on resilient communities. And we'd like to present an example of a modern almshouse, which is applying some of the factors that are emerging as important for resilience. The format of the webinar is as follows. Jenny Pannell will begin by introducing the almshouse movement, its historical roots, and aspects of legal status and the role of almshouses in housing today. I then will give an overview of our research project, which is entitled Almshouse Resilient Communities, or ARC, for the future. I'll hand over then to Dr. Evelyn Callaghan, who is Research Fellow on the project. Evelyn will present some of the findings from the project and a sense of what is important and what has been important to the residents we interviewed. After Evelyn, Dr. Alison Pooley will provide an architectural perspective. Alison, with Jenny, wrote the RICS report on almshouses produced in 2020, and she'll draw on the findings in that report, as well as site visits from the ARC project to describe key aspects of spatial layout and design of almshousing. And finally, Alison Benzimra from United St Saviour's Charity will present a new almshouse, which is in Bermondsey, London, and currently undergoing final fit out and due to open this summer. To make sure we didn't suffer any technical glitches, we've pre-recorded the presentations, but while they're running, please do put your thoughts, comments, questions in the Q&A, and we'll come back to summarise and get some discussion going after the presentations. So Ev, if you'd like to start the presentation there. Thank you.
Hello. I'm Jenny Pannell. I've been researching housing, care and support for older people, and especially the current and future role of almshouses for many years. To clarify the unique legal and regulatory status of almshouse charities, I'll need to use some precise language. I'll start the webinar by exploring four questions. What is an almshouse? Who lives in almshouses? Who owns and manages almshouses? And what can almshouses offer their local communities? So what is an almshouse? The almshouse is the oldest form of community-based social housing. The almshouse movement has its origins in monastic communities of 1,000 years ago, evidence of a highly resilient model for housing people in need. Almshouses are one example of charitable involvement in the provision of health, welfare and education in England over the centuries. Other examples include Oxford University and St Thomas Hospital in London, both founded in the 11th century. There were significant changes after the Reformation with the dissolution of the monasteries, but some almshouse provision continued and new almshouses were still created. It's only in the 20th century that such charitable involvement changed to a complementary role in the provision of social welfare in what is sometimes described as welfare pluralism. The oldest almshouse that still exists was founded in the 10th century, although the current building isn't quite that old. It dates from the 19th century. Almshouses have been founded in every century by monasteries and churches, kings and queens, landowners, merchants, philanthropists, entrepreneurs, and other local benefactors. Scandalous conditions in 19th century workhouses inspired wealthy philanthropists, and around 30% of almshouse foundations date from this period. Today, almshouses provide low-cost housing for local people in housing need, and most residents are older people. There are 30,000 individual almshouse dwellings, most are flats or cottages, in cities, towns and villages on 2,500 separate sites. Nearly all almshouses are in England because of different social, religious and political histories elsewhere. Over 500 groups of almshouses are listed buildings and part of our national heritage, often with distinctive architectural styles. Many almshouses are modern, purpose-built developments, and new almshouses are still being built today, as we will explore later in the webinar. Hello, I'm Jenny Pannell. So, who lives in almshouses? Around 35,000 people live in almshouses, and most almshouse residents are older people, with ages ranging from 50 or 60 to over 100. You'll hear more from some almshouse residents when we have almshouse residents we have interviewed later in the webinar. When new residents apply for housing in an almshouse, they will have to meet the criteria for each charity. Most almshouses ask for a local connection. This can be narrow, perhaps one local church parish, or wide, such as a London borough or a county. From the medieval period to the 19th century, almshouses were founded to house older people with links to a particular craft or occupation, usually through employment and before retirement. Some almshouses are only for women or for men, or for members of a specific Christian denomination. Larger charities now often provide housing with on-site support staff. This is sometimes called sheltered housing. Some almshouses have always housed younger people and families with children. There is now increasing interest in the almshouse movement to provide housing for younger people in housing need and to create mixed communities with families and younger people. Two of our partner charities have plans for housing young people, families with children and younger people with learning disabilities, as well as older residents. Almshouse residents pay a weekly maintenance contribution. This is similar to rent, but very different in law because residents are beneficiaries of a charity and not tenants. So, who owns and manages almshouses? Almshouses are owned and managed by unique, legally defined charities. There are 1,600 independent almshouse charities, but most are quite small. 1,000 charities have no more than 20 dwellings. Nearly 500 charities have up to 50 dwellings. There are only 100 charities with more than 50 dwellings. Our partner charities include some very small almshouses and the largest almshouse charity, which has over 1,700 dwellings. Almshouse charities are led by local volunteer trustees, and larger charities employ staff. The Charity Commission is the regulator for almshouse charities. Trustees have to apply for permission from the Charity Commission if they want to make significant changes which alter the wishes of the original benefactor. This can include changes to the criteria for new residents. The shared history of each almshouse charity is what makes them all special, different, and unique. This has created a community of people over time, from the original benefactors through a succession of residents, trustees, and sometimes staff, and sometimes over many hundred years. So, what can almshouse charities offer their local communities? Because it's clear that 30,000 almshouse dwellings cannot answer all the need for affordable housing. So why are they important in the 21st century? First of all, it's important to be aware that almshouse charities can and do work with other partners, and they can complement local housing, social care and older people strategies. 3 of our partner charities are providing new almshouses with their own resources, with little or no grant and working closely with their local authorities. 2 of our partners also have care homes. For some charities, the endowments of land and investments from their original founders and later benefactors have increased in value over time, so they can build new almshouses or renovate older almshouses with little or no grant funding. By contrast, other charities, especially small ones, may have very little endowment resources except for the almshouse buildings, so finding the money to pay for major repairs and refurbishment and upgrading can be a challenge. Unlike most social housing provided by local councils and housing associations, almshouse dwellings cannot be bought under a right to buy, and this is important because it means that they remain available to local people in perpetuity. In a few localities, almshouse charities are significant providers of housing for older people, but elsewhere what almshouses offer is not the number of dwellings compared with other social housing, but their convenient location. Examples include almshouses in expensive areas, such as central London, in town centres near shops and transport, and in villages where there is often little or even no affordable rental housing. In such areas, almshouses can provide an additional and affordable housing option, enabling local people to maintain links with neighbourhood, family and friends. I will now hand back to Niamh, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Jenny. I'll now spend a few moments talking about the Arc for the Future research project. The project is funded by the Dunhill Medical Trust, and we're very fortunate in working with 7 charity partners, as well as the Suffolk Sustainability Institute at the University of Suffolk. Our partners manage almshouses and other community services in the Midlands, London, Surrey, County Durham, Bristol and East Anglia. In managing the project, we have a residents advisory group with 11 members who are residents at 4 of our partners. In addition, we have a professionals advisory group with 21 members who bring enormous expertise across housing and older housing in particular, as well as almshouses, housing law and EDI, equality, diversity and inclusion. The core project team has 7 members, 3 of whom are sector experts from outside of academia. And the team is multidisciplinary, with backgrounds in almshouse research, housing, architecture, environmental psychology and anthropology. We're now almost exactly halfway through the project, which started in February of last year and will complete in July 2024. So far, we have conducted interviews with 36 residents, 18 staff and trustees, and conducted 10 site visits. In our title, we use the term resilient, but what do we mean? It's fair to say that there is a danger of the word resilient becoming a bit like sustainable, where it covers so much that at times it's hard to know exactly what it's referring to. So when we're here about resilient, we should be asking the question, resilience of what to what? On the ARC project, we are investigating the resilience of communities, almshouse communities, to major global events, climate change, of course, and pandemic being another, and to major community events, which could be the retirement of a long-serving member of staff, for example, or it could be the closure of a local transport link. An engineering approach to resilience is often to simply restore previous functionality after a shock event, put things back the way they were. But we're taking a perspective that has emerged and been developed from thinking around ecological networks and social networks and systems research. This socio-ecological approach sees resilience in terms of adaptive capacity of a system. One definition of social resilience is this approach from McLean and colleagues, where they talk about the adaptive and learning capacity of individuals, groups and institutions to self-organise in a way that maintains system function in the face of change. And in fact, we're stressing the adaptive capacity as being the ability of the system or the community to become more capable after change, more capable of facing future change. Another aspect of the complexity of resilience is its multiple dimensions. So we could, for example, look at financial resilience or the resilience of individuals. But on the ARC project, we are looking at three interconnected dimensions. Social resilience, which is that of the people who make up the Almshouse community. Built environment resilience and governance resilience. There are many overlaps between these. The people of the Almshouse community include not only the residents, who are of course central, but also the staff and trustees. The built environment includes not only the buildings and grounds that are owned and managed by the charity, but also the wider setting. Is it urban or rural? What sort of local transport links are there? What facilities are there in the locale? And so on. Governance includes not only the current chair and trustees and processes in place, but also the rules of the Charity Commission, for example, which can constrain what changes are possible, and the stipulations in the will of the original founder of the charity, which may set limits on who may become a resident. From previous research on resilience in societies, particularly after disasters, we know that social capital is a particularly important factor. And this is why we emphasise the social dimension as critical, alongside and interacting with the built environment and governance, which of course are also mutually influencing. The research question that we're pursuing is what builds resilience in almshouse communities in this wider and integrated sense. We're looking for what has worked, examples that may be useful to others, and not in any sense an evaluation. Our methods are primarily qualitative. We want to gather data that includes context, both physical and social context, and the time dimension, and to encompass the particularly unique nature of each almshouse. We need to understand the setting in order to explore to what extent and how findings could be applied more widely. The project will deliver a toolkit for three audiences: residents, staff, and trustees of almshouses. It will include exemplars and case studies, and it will detail the contexts in which approaches were found to be useful. We've completed phase 1 data collection, and we've done initial analysis and prepared some preliminary findings. These are summarised in the diagram here, and I'll just let you have a quick read of those. Now, we won't have time, unfortunately, to go through to discuss all of them, but I'm going to hand over now to Evelyn and then to Alison to talk about just some of the themes.
So as Niamh has highlighted, we have many preliminary findings that I have listed out here. We don't have time to go through all of them, but I've highlighted three that I think are particularly interesting and which were particularly well evidenced in this first phase of our research. So those include that security and stability are prerequisites for resilience. A sense of autonomy for residents can be aided by providing choices wherever possible, and that the communication of change facilitates resilience. So the first thing I'm going to highlight here is around security and stability. So for some residents, moving to an almshouse improves their housing security. So this includes financial security, so the much more affordable weekly maintenance contribution as opposed to perhaps private rent or even mortgage payments and house upkeep. Right, the almshouse is a much more affordable option that can provide them with some financial security that they may have been lacking before. Physical security is also very important. Residents overwhelmingly feel safe in their homes. In fact, unanimously thus far, the residents that we have interviewed report that they feel very safe in their homes. And they may have been living in situations previously where they did not feel as physically safe and secure. And whether it's because of having staff on hand or the layout of the almshouse or having gates, locked, different things like that, they feel that they have that physical security. As well as emotional security. So residents are able to settle into routines, make connections with other people, and put down long-term roots. They are able to plan on just living out the rest of their days if that's what they would like to do in the almshouse. Particularly, this is the case on some of the larger sites where they have a range of accommodations to accommodate residents as their needs change. So this can look like moving from completely independent living within the main almshouse to an assisted living wing or facility that's on the same site if their needs increase. And in fact, some sites even have full nursing homes as well. So residents are really able to put down roots and plan that this is the place that they're going to stay and remain. And having that security and stability allows people to focus on other matters. So without those stressors in their life, they can have a peace of mind that allows them to focus on coping with change, for example, thus making them more resilient. The next finding was around autonomy and having choices. So we have found that resilience is improved by having some amount of choice or say in your own life, in your living situation. Residents can have agency even when some elements of the change are inevitable. So, for example, one of our sites, the residents are having to move into a new almshouse. The current location needs to be knocked down and completely rebuilt. So they are being moved into another location. There's no option not to move for them, right? So they don't have choice in that sense. However, the residents worked with the charity and worked with each other to find alternatives where needed. So for some people, that looked like moving to another site. So talking with the charity, finding alternate options to stay closer to the neighborhood where they were currently living, for example. That was what was important to some people. Or to move to another site run by the same charity to stay within that charity, since the site where the majority of residents were moving is operated by a different charity. So those were options. Some residents, they just were benefited by exploring the different options that were available, even if they didn't take them. So one resident specifically looked at these different options of moving to another site nearby, moving to another site run by the same charity, and in the end decided to actually move with the rest of their neighbors. But they benefited from being able to explore those options, from having that agency, even if they ended up going with the original plan. Additionally, with this move, once the new building is built, all of the residents have the choice of whether or not to move back to their original almshouse, but in the shiny new building, or to stay where they have been relocated to, which is also a new building that is being finished right now. Again, this is a choice that residents have not all decided what they're going to do, and are also open to changing their minds in that approximately 5 years time, but they appreciate having the choice and having some say in where they live. And finally, I will highlight the communication of change and how important it is to get that communication right. Particularly in this instance, we are talking about communication from the charity, from the almshouse organization, to the residents. So residents prefer a range of formats be available. This includes physical, digital, and face-to-face. It was widely recognized that each resident will have their own individual preference, as well as they recognize that their neighbors may have a different preference to them. So a range of formats, whether that's physical letters, regular newsletters, posters or flyers hung up in communal spaces, emails, phone calls, or going around and knocking on doors were all forms of communication that were valued by residents. The frequency of communication is also important. So not having too frequent communications where they pile up and might be ignored or things might be missed, but having regular enough check-ins that residents feel like they are in the loop, that they know what's going on is very important, as is the timing of communication. For example, residents want to feel like they were being communicated with in a timely manner, that there wasn't information that was being withheld or that they were waiting to hear about. So timing that communication, quickly after the information is known, and making that information available to residents quickly, as well as considering the timing of information in terms of it being actionable once it is received by residents. For example, communication related to COVID, even by simply providing the latest government information or explaining what changes the government rules meant for residents was very helpful. That information was, of course, being communicated by the government, but by having it put into specific wording that was relevant to them as residents by the charity, that was something that residents at many sites found to be very helpful. And communication in advance of change can help people to begin to process it and deal with anxieties, thus making them more resilient to that change. So with the previous example of the move, having lots of communication in advance of the move has helped people to start the process of accepting it. In fact, they've had many years knowing that the move was happening. That was communicated to them very, very early on in the process. So they've had that time to identify anxieties they have about it, to deal with them, call in their support networks, and be able to face that change. And finally, even no information can be communicated. Again, with the example of the move, there is actually still an unknown date. The exact date of the move is not decided yet. So that's an example of no information. There's no update to give to residents. However, regularly communicating to the residents that there is still no update, that there is still no move date set, was something that was really, really important, because otherwise they felt like when that communication was not happening, they felt like they were waiting around for information, when in fact there was no news. Things were still up in the air. So communicating that there is no new information or no update is something that was really valuable. And now I will pass it on to Alison P., who's going to talk about a few more of the findings.
Thank you, Evelyn, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alison Pooley, and I'm a Research Fellow at the Suffolk Sustainability Institute, which is part of the University of Suffolk. I'm also a trustee of a small almshouse charity. My role in the research project is looking at resilience from a built environment perspective. I'm going to talk to you today about two aspects from our preliminary findings: communal space and sense of place. I have a long-standing interest in almshouses through my research, practice, trustee roles and teaching. And today I'll be moving through some images to give you a flavour of various different almshouses, both from our current project partners and from previous research projects, including the 2020 RICS report that Jenny and I authored. I'm going to talk about communal space and a sense of place through three different lenses: plan form, personalisation and permeability. The courtyard typology form varies, whether that's 3 or 4-sided, horseshoe, very open courtyards, and it's not just a feature of historic almshouses. And here are 3 different forms that we'll be looking at. Provision of communal outdoor space is important for residents. The quality and usability of that space is also critical. And here we have a large courtyard that is never bisected along its axis, other than by architecture students. And residents tend to walk around the perimeter, which takes them past entrance doors and porches, their neighbours, creating incidental opportunities to meet, talk and maybe sit a while. A more open courtyard with a grand facade belies the very different nature and grain of these extended and renovated homes. Here is Saffron Walden. It isn't unusual across the range of almshouse types we've looked at, and front doors unused and back doors with communal or small private gardens taking priority, and you can see that here. That space is more intimate and personal. This third example is from Hoptons in London, and you may recognise the flats looming above in the background in the image on the right. Again, we can see well-used shared space with a smaller courtyard at the front, providing a processional route to the main entrance and the trustee room. And this more intimate courtyard acts as a well-used communal space for residents. and to host events with communal productive gardens behind. Here are two further examples of the courtyard typology, one in London and one in Hull. And these almshouses are almost turning their backs on the development that has grown up around them, whether that's industrial or commercial. So residents here can look out onto and into an urban oasis, and it's quite possible when you're in these spaces to forget you're in a city. So it's not just the courtyard typology that has shared open space, of course, and this small terrace of almshouses have very little individual garden space, but they do have a generous communal space to the front, which almost acts as a village green. Slightly elevated, this provides a view out and across to the streetscape beyond, connecting the residents with each other and their wider neighbourhood. The second theme I'd like to talk about today is personalisation of place. The opportunity and ability to personalise shared space, whether internal circulation areas or in communal gardens. Personalisation can be important for the residents, although it can lead to the perception of ownership, which can be exclusive. There's a balance to be struck between embracing and enabling personalisation of shared space and equity and use of space. And then there's also the important aspect of creating places where more personal activities can take place, which are less open to public access and views. The final theme I'm going to talk about today is permeability. Here is a stable door, allowing the residents to look over and out onto the communal village green we saw earlier. And on the right is an entrance to almshouses, open to the public but not necessarily welcoming to public access. And I think that's an important distinction. This permeability is a common device in the Dutch Hofje as well. An enclosed courtyard garden is permeable to foot traffic but rarely used by the general public. And here we're looking back down the axis of that underused central axis of the almshouses I showed earlier, the wide courtyard to the main entrance with a main road beyond, and you can see the petrol station in the distance. Personalisation, of course, can extend to the use of balconies because they also provide those opportunities, both for personalisation and for connection with neighbours, overlooking other activities within the grounds of the almshouses. And in this case, in Sydenham, you can actually see across almost the whole of London, central London. There's a tangible commitment to the provision of communal space, whether in the form of shared gardens or gathering spaces in internal areas. Almshouses can provide an interesting mix of independent living and close community, and this is partly achieved through opportunities created through built form. How the space is used and the success of these spaces draws on the other two strands that we've presented this afternoon of governance and social resilience. I hope I've given you a small taste of the different types of almshouses we've been researching, most recently through the ARC project, and that whilst there is no one approach, we can start to see a commonality in the provision of resilient housing. We look forward to exploring the issues further in the second phase of the ARC project, and I'll now hand over to Alison Ben-Zimra for the final presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me today. I am Alison Ben-Zimra, Head of Research and Influence at United St. Saviour's Charity. The charity was established in 1541, so we have over 500 years' experience of addressing the needs of Southwark residents. Today we manage a portfolio of investment properties, the income of which goes towards our community investment activities. We have 2 almshouses, and in the summer we'll be opening Appleby Blue, our new innovative almshouse in Bermondsey. Our research and influence activities involve collaborating with universities to provide evidence-based research findings and then share these findings widely within the housing and aging sectors. Although we have a long history, we are forward-thinking and focus on innovation. Older people from lower socioeconomic groups living in inner cities experience a disproportionately lower healthy life expectancy, which is characterized by multiple chronic health conditions, exacerbated by loneliness, and economically deprived older people are 35% more likely to experience reporting ageism. Often, older people in social housing are pushed out into the margins. They are either forced to move out of their communities, away from their families and the familiar, or they're confined to live in larger, energy inefficient homes which are unsuitable for their disability or frailty. They can be put off by sheltered housing that is in a poor location, has poor design, and offers poor services. With Appleby Blue, we want to give people the chance to move into a beautiful and well-designed home and environment. With this in mind, design is the cross-cutting principle to the physical, social, and resident support model of Appleby Blue. The architects and the charity's residents, trustees, and staff imagined the almshouse together. The design process of Appleby Blue realized the vision of a dignified later life, irrespective of socioeconomic status. The physical design of Appleby Blue encourages beneficial factors of community living. The U-shaped courtyard enables incidental interaction, and a communal facing aspect allows for neighbors to be involved in the comings and goings, with benches on the walkways to provide comfortable places to sit and chat with neighbors. Consideration was given to the threshold of private flats onto unheated walkways. Having unheated walkways dismantles this institutionalized process of aging that can often occur in housing for older people. It encourages residents not to leave their homes in dressing gowns and slippers, but rather prepare themselves for being out in the world. This distinction has a positive effect on mental health. Often housing for older people is pulled back from the street. Appleby Blue has been designed to do the reverse and actually to be visible from the street. The double volume glazed front allows for passerbys to look into the vibrant activity within the almshouse and see that the lives of older people can be joyful and productive. The design of the building enables a cascading level of interaction between the surrounding community and the almshouse residents. The glazed front showcases activities in the community kitchen and center. The intention of this visibility from the street is to create a fluidity between the different groups who share the almshouse communal spaces. Through the community center, one can see through into the shared courtyard gardens. Nature increases one's sense of well-being, and this green space can be enjoyed by residents and those using the community center. The gradient of private and communal continues into the center of the building, with the residents' glazed walkways, which allows for visibility but also a sense of security for residents with an access-only entry point for residents. Residents and their visitors have private use of this area and the residents-only rooftop garden. The cascading design creates a series of gentle thresholds of sociability. Filtering the shared communal space to private, secure homes enables residents to choose the degree of social interaction they wish to be involved in. Nothing is forced upon residents, but the physical design facilitates social interaction and agency over social engagement with others. The building provides generous space for use by local groups and residents. This project embeds the residents in their community and directly on the active high street, so that the people who live and work in the almshouse are members of a thriving mixed community of all ages. The intergenerational use of the space aims to break down the barriers between young and old. This integration of the design elements of the building and social engagement opportunities will result in a sense of place for the building in Bermondsey and a sense of belonging and connectedness for its users. The Appleby Community Kitchen sits alongside the community centre. The kitchen will provide a space for residents and local groups to come together around food growing, food cooking, and meal sharing. In July, we're starting a community-based food model research project with Bournemouth University. The project will be co-produced with older residents and involve intergenerational activities. The resident support model for the almshouse is integral to the physical environment and place. The resident support team will work closely with the community centre manager to create a holistic support plan which encompasses repairs and maintenance, benefits guidance, and health and well-being outcomes. Appleby Blue demonstrates that there is a need to build more good quality social housing for older people in inner cities. As London's older population increases in size and diversity, buildings that address the housing crisis for older Londoners, whilst also providing a space for social cohesion, demonstrates the value older people bring to society. United St. Saviour's is a progressive organisation with big ambitions for the future. Our aim is to increase the impact in more people's lives through demonstrating best practice and showcasing integrated design models of housing with support in inner city community centres. I look forward to our conversation after the presentations. Thanks so much.
Thank you all. So if I can invite the panelists now to turn on cameras and audio, and I'll just do a quick summary and then we'll turn to some of the interesting questions that have come in. So in summary, what we have heard about today is about the importance of almshouses as a complementary form of social housing with long historical roots, but great relevance continuing into the future. And a particular importance of almshouses is their role in local provision of housing. From Evelyn, we got a sense of some of the factors that almshouse residents felt were part of building resilience and facilitating dealing with change. So feeling secure and having stability in their housing, having agency and choice, which mattered even where major changes were inevitable, and having effective and timely communication of change. Alison Pooley then focused on three aspects of spatial arrangement and design: courtyard layouts, where they work or sometimes not, permeability of community space, and personalization of space. And finally, Alison Benzimra introduced us to Appleby Blue, a new almshouse which has paid great attention to designing for social interactions within and beyond the almshouse community and supporting agency in choice of levels of privacy or interaction. So now over to you. We've had some questions come in, and if I can invite Ev just to facilitate there and hand them to the appropriate panelist.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, let's start with this question from Frank. I think Alison Pooley, if you want to take this one, but Alison Benzimra might also have something to say. So Frank says, realizing almshouses were sometimes built with a communal space such as a chapel, have their uses changed across more secular times? For example, what is the trustees' meeting room in Hopton's almshouse used for instance?
Yeah, well, they have, yeah. So chapels can be used as meeting rooms or as communal spaces. That's what quite often, what they get used for. If you remember the sort of bigger courtyard, the open courtyard that was in Saffron Walden, the chapel there, the chapel space there is used for, communal meetings, and also to be hired out to the community, so other people can use it. So yes, things have changed. seen various chapels at various places being used for all sorts of things, but they're usually quite small. They're usually quite small spaces. So what usually they get used for is meetings, informal meetings, or sort of fish and chip supper nights and things like that. They can be used for if there isn't any other communal space. I don't know, Alison, if you want to add about the chapel at Hopton's, or the trustees meeting actually, rather than the chapel, isn't it? And Jenny may have something to add too.
So as the as the charity has grown, we actually have separate offices now. So trustee meetings, for example, will be used at our head office, but we call it the John Fryer Room. That's a shared space, and in winter we actually kept it as a warm hub for residents, so it was constantly heated. So I think, speaking from United St. Saviour's perspective, they definitely, as you're saying, Alison, just communal shared spaces, but not necessarily used for its original purpose.
Thanks, both Alisons. So we've got a few questions here about almshouses catering to different groups. So about almshouses providing care to disabled people or chronically ill people, or perhaps just into the older age, so more of a higher level of care need, as well as almshouses for younger people under retirement age, but perhaps still with having some kind of disability or care need. I suppose maybe Jenny, do you want to talk about the sort of different requirements of different almshouses and the different populations that they serve?
Yes, some almshouse charities have always housed younger people, not necessarily with disabilities, and also families. And in fact, one of my favourites, I think, is Shrewton Flood Charities, which was founded after some very severe floods, apparently, in southern Wiltshire, and provided housing, short terraces of family housing in villages. And I remember interviewing a young woman there who was able to stay in the village where she wanted to stay, because otherwise for social housing, she'd have had to go to the nearest very large town. So some have always been for younger people, and there's been renewed interest lately. There are a number of examples where small charities like Girton, just outside Cambridge, has recently built their second development for younger people and families. One or two of those were specifically for people with disabilities as well. The other thing to say is that even almshouses primarily for people, older people, though, I mean, that can be quite a broad range from 50 upwards, will sometimes even have young people younger still if they have a particular reason to need the care and support that's provided because of some form of life-limiting illness or disability. So in terms of almshouse charities providing more support for people with greater needs, we've mentioned already that two of our partner charities also have care homes. There aren't that many almshouse charities that do that, but some do. And so it is quite difficult to generalize about all these different charities because they vary so much from ones with just maybe 2 cottages to ones with, well, 1,700 in terms of Durham Aged Miners' homes. So there is a very wide range. And for anyone interested, there are more examples in some of our publications as well. For example, the crescent, the very striking crescent in one of Alison's presentations was built specifically for families, with just a few units there, if I remember rightly, Alison, for single or older people. So there is a wide range, although most have always been considered as for older people, even though in many cases there's no age limit actually imposed in the original will or rules. So
thanks, Jenny. There's a very interesting question here from Robert. I think, Niamh, you might be able to speak to this. So Robert says, with perhaps less than 2% housing suitable for the elderly, and we tend to be reactive instead of proactive, the housing option you discuss, will this start to increase? Will there be more almshouses, I suppose, especially after COVID, that perhaps made people more aware of their own vulnerability and the importance of community support?
Yeah, really interesting point. I think, what from the work that our charity partners are doing, we do see a number of almshouses in a position to continue to develop their offering. And that's going on with quite a few of the almshouse charities. But as Jenny pointed out, it's a very small overall in terms of the housing need, and particularly amongst older people. It is a relatively small part, and so I don't think realistically we can expect it to change from that. But I think what this research, part of the aim of this, that although we're working within almshouse communities, which give us an opportunity to think about particularly older communities as a slightly bounded idea, but we're also looking for what we can learn here for housing for older people more generally, and particularly housing for older people in a time of climate crisis. So we are focusing on almshouses, but we're looking to learn what lessons we can that can be applied beyond almshouses in other forms of older housing.
Can I just add to that as well? I just wanted to say that if people are really interested in developing more almshouses or thinking about how they might be developed, that towards the end of the RICS report that Jenny and I wrote in 2020, there are some suggestions there for how we might develop more, because I think that's one of the things that I find very exciting about the potential, because of the issue around in perpetuity and being and affordability in its true sense, I guess. Sorry, thank you.
Thanks, Alison. Another interesting question here from, sorry, let me just find it again. Yes, from James. Is there an adjustment period for people moving from a more isolated living arrangement into a community ethos? And if so, how is this transition catered for? Alison B., do you think you could speak to that from your experience?
Yes, in fact, I'm very pleased that you asked me. It's a really interesting question. In fact, I've been involved in a research project prior to this, which addressed that, was on how people transitioned into retirement communities, because it is a very different structure. With Appleby Blue, we're taking a whole new cohort of residents, some of which will come from another almshouse, but others will be coming from various circumstances within the wider community. And that's something as a team, we're doing a whole induction and orientation process for our residents, because we know what an adjustment that can be to living in such a community. So it is something that we're considering all the time, and something that we also consider with new residents moving into our existing communities. So there's various ways to look at that in terms of more established communities, but also brand new communities, and creating a sense of culture with residents.
Thanks, Alison. I have another question here from Frank again. Can new almshouses remain a distinct type of sheltered housing moving into the future? And what are the opportunities for expanding and flourishing their distinctiveness? Jenny, do you think you could speak to that?
Yes, I think one of the interesting things about almshouse charity, certainly our partners and others that I've worked with over a number of years, is that they do normally have dedicated staff attached to that particular community. There have been a lot of changes in what used to be called sheltered housing over the past, 20 years at least. And in many cases, there's very limited, if any, support staff available. And very often they're really only working with a few of the individuals who are felt to have a need for support, which means there's no one looking more broadly at how the community as a whole functions. And that can be something as basic as, if you've got a shared laundry room, for example, are there issues about who uses it and when, and so on. So there can be all sorts of issues that arise across the whole community, which are often not handled very well if you don't have some form of staff on site, not necessarily residential. And many of our partners and almshouse charities I've worked with no longer have they used to sometimes be called resident wardens, which sounds rather unfortunate term, I think. So the staff may not be actually resident on site, and that can be often better if they're not, in some people's views. But there will be dedicated staff attached to that community, whereas an awful lot of sheltered housing provided by especially larger providers doesn't have that to the same extent.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Jenny, and thanks, Ev. I'm going to need to suggest we draw to a halt there because we're keen to make sure people's time is we're mindful of people's time. Thank you all. Thank you for the comments. We have a request also for the link to the RICS report, so we'll make sure that that comes out to participants. So thank you all for your time today. Sustainable Places will be back with another topic next month, and sign up details are in the chat, and we hope to see you there. So thank you again, and goodbye.